our video for Maundy Thursday, also called Holy Thursday, and that's a fancy word for commandment. And this is the Sunday where Jesus commanded his followers, right? Where he commanded us to love each other and said, hey, this is sort of the pattern. This is who you're going to be. And this is also the last of our Love Is series messages. We've been looking at this description from 1 Corinthians 13 of what love is. Love is patient. Love is kind. Let's look at the list again. Grab a Bible and open up to that, to 1 Corinthians 13, right? Love is patient. It's kind. It doesn't envy. It doesn't boast. It says it does not insist on its own way. It's not irritable or resentful. It doesn't keep a list of wrongs that are done against it. It doesn't rejoice at wrongdoing. In fact, it rejoices with the truth. Love bears all things, it believes all things, and it hopes all things. It endures all things. This past Sunday, we learned that love never ends. All those other things, prophecy, knowledge, tongues, all of that is going to pass away. Right? We live in a world where it's sort of, where we don't, there's so many distractions, there's so many things, but when love appears, right? When Jesus comes again, when eternity starts, there's no separation. It's 100% perfect and awesome. And so tonight we're going to finish out with these three things, right? Faith, hope, and love abide. And he says, but the greatest is love. And the question I have for you today is, do you see those words, that description, as optional? Do you see them as nice? I heard a preacher said, these could be nice. They sound nice, don't they? Patient, kind, loving, right? All these nice words. But he said, nice doesn't change things. It doesn't cause me to go, whoa, I'm not real patient. I'm not real kind. Because we know what happens when people aren't patient and when they aren't kind. We know what happens when people are arrogant and when they boast, when they're always insisting on their own way, and every little thing makes them upset, and they're keeping a ledger, and they're keeping a notebook of every little thing you've done wrong. We know that leads to disaster. That leads to like relationships being just destroyed, and people's hearts just crushed, and all these things happen. And God's saying, all right, so are you going to go with his, are we going to go with his description of love or our description? Am I going to go with my version or his? Because I don't know about you, but his version sounds like everything that I need. And that's the good news. That's the amazing thing today is that he's given it all to us. It is exactly what we need, and it's exactly what he continues to give to us each and every day. All of that. His love that has no conditions. He never puts a line in the sand and says, okay, I will love you as long as you don't cross this line. I'll love you up until this, and maybe it's a number of times that you do something or whatever. And he's saying, look, there's no limit. That's what his love is all about. And so today we want to look at this and say, you know what? We got to stop making it optional. We got to stop saying, hey, this is just nice, but to say this is who God's called me to be. And really, this is an amazing gift of love that I can give to the people all around me, the people we work with, the people we go to school with, the people that we interact with. Got it? So let's look at, on this Maundy Thursday, right, this Holy Thursday, we go up into the upper room with Jesus and his disciples, and they're going to do the Last Supper. He's going to take that bread and take that wine and say, this is my body, this is my blood, it's given and shed for you. It's going to be the way that your sins are forgiven, because I'm going to lay my life down. I'm going to let them torture me. I'm going to let them mock me and accuse me and falsely accuse me. I'm going to let them do all those things because of his love for us. Willingly, he lays his life down. And that's what that supper is all about. He's saying, you know what? Remember that Passover lamb, right? Where the people were coming out in Exodus out of Egypt, and God saved them from Pharaoh, and they put the blood of the lamb, that perfect lamb, on the doorpost. He's saying, look, I'm the perfect lamb, and my blood now covers you. Now I know that at first blush that sounds like really, really gory. But what it means is that God doesn't see our sin if we're covered by Jesus. He has paid the price. He's taking care of the bill. 100%. So we don't have to keep sacrificing. We don't him or anything else. He made that sacrifice once and for all. And as he's up there, he's like, look, and I'm giving you a thing. It's called the Lord's Supper, where you're gonna drink wine, and you're gonna eat that bread. But it's my body and it's my blood, and it's a mysterious way that all comes together, and where he brings us this reality, reminds us again that we're part of this. Not just a mental reminder, but really just sort of a more of an experiential. I don't even know how to say it. Like we're reconnected to who he is. We're reconnected to that death on the cross, that resurrection for us, where he came to life and triumphed over sin and death. What an awesome thing. And we read in John 13 that before the feast of Passover, he knew that his hour had come to depart from out of this world to the Father, having loved, listen to this, having loved his own who were in the world, he loved them to the end. This word could also mean he loved them to the utmost. He loved them right up unto the end. Like he didn't stop. Like he didn't let his foot off the gas even a little bit. He just kept on going and saying, you know what? This is the culmination of it. Like this is the ultimate expression that he would go to the cross. But he also wants us to know how we should love and how we should treat each other. And by the way, he has said this many, many times. Remember when James and John, the sons of Zebedee, the sons of thunder, they were arguing about who was the greatest. In fact, their mom came and said, "Hey, can my boys have the left hand side and the right hand side, like spots of power? What do you think?" And Jesus is like, "What?" Like they totally missed the point. He's talked about giving his life down. He's talking about serving. In fact, he said that the lords of the Gentiles, the lords of those who don't believe in God, what's their way of looking at things? Well, they lord it over the ones that are under them. They have that system. He says, not so you. The greatest is actually the least among you. And the one who wants to be great, he goes, they got to be the servant. And that's exactly what Jesus does here. He loves them, right? And it's during that supper that he gets up. And we read here, he says that the devil had already put into the heart of Judas Iscariot, Simon's son, to betray him. So that's already happening. And Jesus, knowing that Father had given them all these things into his hands, and that he had come from God, and that he was going back to God, right? He knew that this is the plan. Like he knows that these people are all going to leave him. And that's how much he loves them. And keep that in mind when he gets up and then washes their feet. He washes the feet of those who are going to run, who are going to abandon him. So he rose from supper. Now, normally, like back in the Middle East, back in those days, you walked around with sandals. You didn't take a car. You weren't jumping in a minivan. You were probably walking somewhere, and it was dusty. It was dirty. Your feet were probably so they were dirty. So there was a custom, right? And it was part of of when you went to somebody's house or when you were part of a dinner, they would wash your feet. But it wasn't done by the people who owned the house probably. It was probably done by a slave or a servant that they had. And for most Jewish people like this, history has told us that most people kind of thought it was beneath them. And so they would even get someone who was not Jewish to do it. Because that's how low of a task this is. And just think about that for yourself. Would you even want someone washing your feet? I struggle with this. I would not feel comfortable with somebody washing my feet. Because it's a very personal thing. I mean, those are my feet, and I'd be embarrassed, right? Because I don't know, maybe they stink after I've been running or something, right? And then there's the whole thing when Jesus goes to wash their feet. What does he do? He doesn't just he literally takes the form of a servant. Not figuratively, not kind of, just as a figure of speech, but literally. His outer garment, he takes off what he has, grabs a towel, ties it around his waist. I mean, it's how the servant would gear up to do his thing. And he pours water into a basin, begins to wash the disciples' feet, and he wipes them with a towel that was wrapped around him. And so he gets to Simon Peter. And Simon Peter, who, again, always kind of, he speaks before he thinks. Quite often, he as often has one foot in his mouth And he says, Lord, you're going to wash my feet? And Jesus says, actually what I'm doing now, you're not going to understand. But afterwards, you're going to understand. You're going to understand what it means that you got to serve. What's going to mean to sacrifice. What's going to mean to put your life on the line for the people, your brothers and your sisters, and what that's going to look like. Right? What I've talked about, not having these hierarchies and not having these, I'm better than you, or I'm above you, or you're below me, or all those things, or having any task being below us. He's like, that doesn't fit. And Peter says, you're never going to wash my feet. And Jesus answered him, look, if I don't wash you, you have no share with me. In other words, if you think this is about what's beneath you, or if you're really kind of not cool with this, he's like, this is what love looks like. And you're going to do things that are probably even far more difficult than this. And if you can't handle this, then maybe this is not going to be for you. And so Simon hears that. And he says, Lord, not only my feet, but my hands and my head. Because Jesus, for him, it was this act of not just service, but connecting with them and saying, you know what? I'm willing to lay my life down for you. It was so much bigger than just, performing a service that they needed done. This was like the relationship thing. This was saying, look, I'm in it with you guys. I'm going to love you to the end. You got to remember that beginning part. And he says, well, the one who is bathed doesn't need to wash except his feet, right? Because you're out. The rest of you is pretty good, but your feet are going to get messed up. He goes, and you're clean, but not everyone. And he knew that Judas had betrayed him. And he says, well, not all of you are clean. So he's pointing to hearts when he talks about cleaning. He's saying, look, I have to die for you, Peter. Do you get that? I'm going to lay my life down willingly for you. That's what this is about. And it said after he'd washed, he put on his outer garment, and he said, do you understand what I've done for you? He says, you call me Lord and teacher. Yeah, and you're right, and that's who I am. But he's going to recast. He goes, but if I, your Lord and teacher, if I've washed your feet, if I'm at the top of the org chart, right, I'm the Lord of the universe, and if I were to do that, then you ought to wash one another's feet. You ought to have that same attitude. Paul even says it in Philippians. He says, look, have the mind the same as the one of Jesus, who for whom like equality with God was not something to be grasped. It wasn't something to be like a trump card to be thrown out and saying, ha, see, this is who I am. No, he took on the form of a slave. Being found in likeness as a man, he humbled himself even to death on a cross. And so here he says, look, I've given you the example that you should do, right? This isn't optional stuff. You should do as I have done for you. So I say to you, a servant isn't greater than his master, nor is a messenger greater than the one who sent him. So if you do these things, you'll be blessed if you do them. There's freedom in it, right? We're connecting in with what love really is and who God has really made us to be. What an awesome thing. Anything else is to fight against that. Everything else is just going to cause all kinds of problems in our lives, in our hearts, in our minds, in our souls. It's just going to be cancer to us. But God is going, look, this is life. This is breath. This is what you were made to be. Now, he's saying, I'm not speaking of all of you, right? He kind of has that one person in mind, right, that there's an issue with. Because I know whom I've chosen, but the Spirit will be fulfilled. He who ate my bread has lifted his heel against me. And I'm telling you this now before it takes place, that when it does take place, you might believe that I am he. And then he goes on in verse 31. He says, now the Son of Man is glorified, and God is glorified in him. God is glorified in him. God will also glorify in himself and glorify him at once. Little children, a little while I am with you. You will seek me, just as I said to the Jews. So now I say to you, where I am going, you cannot come. So here's the deal. I give you this new commandment, that you love one another. Just as I have loved you, you also are to love one another. And look at this. He says in verse 35, and by this, as you love one another, all people will know that you are my disciples. You know that they'll know that you follow me if you have love for one another. Not just that you love, but you have love for one another. That's what it's all about. That's what this whole series called Love has been all about. This whole section in 1 Corinthians, you'll see this concept throughout, right? Jesus even says the greatest commandment is to love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, strength, and love your neighbor as you love yourself. Love. It's at the core, not just any kind of love, but his kind of love, without conditions, without end. A love that we don't even deserve is what he gave to us. So I'm praying that like the rest of your Holy Week goes awesome, that you, again, return. We have another video for Good Friday that's coming up. And again, there on the cross as he suffers and dies, right? And then he comes out of the tomb on Easter morning. So we'll be back. We'll see you for Good Friday.